I never intended to speak about this. Not because I feared the consequences, those arrived long ago, but because some truths do not grow lighter when shared, they only spread. For more than 30 decades, this story remained confined to a single room. A room filled with books no one reads anymore. A desk polished by hands that pretended to be loyal. And silence, thick enough to feel heavier than guilt. I was there because it was my duty. That is what I told myself, every morning, every evening, for years. When you serve a powerful household long enough, you stop being seen as a man. You become part of the furniture, invisible, convenient, trusted. And that trust is what made everything possible. I was not born into that world. I entered it quietly, through a side door, carrying gloves, keys, and secrets that were never meant to be mine. The house itself was old, older than most of the people who lived in it. Its walls were lined with leather-bound volumes, each one heavier than the last. Not because of their words, but because of what they represented. Legacy. Everything in that place existed to remind you that nothing there truly belonged to you. Except obedience. I learned quickly that my role was not only to clean, to serve, or to stand silently behind chairs during long dinners. My true function was to see without being seen. I noticed things others overlooked. The way voices dropped when I entered the room, the sudden pauses in conversation, the glances exchanged, brief, sharp, rehearsed. At first, I thought it was paranoia. Then, I understood. They assumed I was deaf to meaning. They were wrong.
There is a particular danger in staying too long inside other people's lives. You begin to recognize patterns they believe are invisible. At first, I dismissed what I felt as imagination, a mind trying to impose meaning where none existed. But repetition has a way of sharpening suspicion. The lady of the house rarely spoke during meals. When she did, her words were measured, precise, never careless. She avoided looking at her husband for too long, and when their eyes met, there was no warmth, only coordination, like two people playing a role they had rehearsed long before the curtain rose. I noticed how the staff adapted to this tension without being instructed. We moved more quietly, lingered less. Even laughter felt inappropriate in certain corridors. The child, however, remained untouched by these performances. He often wandered into the library, drawn to the silence rather than the books. I would find him standing near the shelves, fingers tracing the spines, as if searching for something familiar. Once he asked me a question that seemed innocent enough. Did my father enjoy reading? I hesitated. Yes, I replied, he still does. The child nodded, but his expression suggested dissatisfaction, as though the answer had failed to resolve something far deeper. Moments like that accumulated, small, unremarkable on their own, impossible to ignore together. The master of the house traveled often, too often for a man so invested in legacy. His departures were abrupt, his returns equally unannounced. The lady never asked where he went, and he never explained. That silence was deliberate. On one occasion, while arranging correspondence in the study, I noticed letters addressed not to the household, but intercepted before delivery. They were carefully hidden, sealed but never opened, not discarded, preserved. That detail mattered. People destroy what they fear. They keep what they might need. By then, I understood that I was standing inside a lie that had been carefully maintained for years, perhaps decades, and I was not the only one who sensed it. During a gathering one evening, distant relatives filled the rooms with polite conversation and forced admiration. Wine flowed freely. It was there that I overheard a whisper I was never meant to hear. Two guests standing too close to the fireplace, speaking softly enough to feel safe. "He looks nothing like him," one said. The other replied, "That's because he isn't." The words landed quietly, but they echoed louder than any accusation. I stepped away before they noticed me. From that moment on, I began to understand my position clearly. I was dangerous, not because I acted, but because I observed, and observation, when unchallenged, becomes power. The lady of the house eventually noticed my awareness. She never confronted me directly. Instead, she tested me. She would ask questions with no correct answer, make statements designed to provoke reaction. "You've been here a long time," she once said casually. "You must know our family better than most." I responded with what had kept me safe for years. "I know my place." She smiled, briefly, but her eyes did not. Soon after, she stopped speaking to me altogether. The master, on the other hand, grew more attentive, too attentive. He would ask about trivial matters, comment on the weather, inquire about my health. None of it sincere. It was surveillance disguised as kindness. I realized then that secrets do not simply sit still. They demand maintenance. Every glance, every silence, every avoided truth required constant reinforcement. And the child remained unaware, or so they believed. One afternoon, as I helped him with a fallen stack of books, he looked up at me and said, "People keep lying to me." The statement was calm, not accusatory. I said nothing. He continued, "I don't know why." That was the moment I understood the true cost of silence. This was no longer about inheritance, or reputation, or betrayal between adults. It was about a life built on an assumption that would one day collapse, and when it did, it would not be gentle. That night, alone in my quarters, I considered leaving. Walking away would have absolved me, at least in theory. But loyalty, once weaponized, becomes difficult to dismantle. I had been trusted for too long, and trust, when broken, does not simply disappear. It turns into something else, something that waits. Because the truth does not rush, it watches, and it was watching all of us.
The document arrived without ceremony. No announcement, no urgency. Just another envelope placed among many others, its weight indistinguishable at first glance. Yet I knew, the moment I touched it, that this was different. It bore the family seal, the signet wing pressed firmly into wax that had not been used in years. That alone was unusual. The master of the house preferred modern assurances, contracts, lawyers, witnesses. This was old, deliberately so. I did not open it. I did not need to. Some objects announce their purpose without revealing their contents. I placed it carefully inside the desk drawer, beneath ledgers and forgotten correspondence, exactly where it would not be seen, yet could not be ignored. By evening, the household felt unsettled. Doors closed more quietly. Footsteps lingered longer outside rooms they did not belong to. The lady of the house avoided the study entirely. She knew, not what the document said, but what it represented. The master returned unexpectedly that night. No warning, no explanation. He asked for the study to be prepared immediately. When I handed him the envelope, I noticed his hand hesitate, just briefly, before breaking the seal. The hesitation betrayed him. As he read, his expression did not change, but his breathing did. A subtle irregularity, easily missed by anyone not trained to observe. When he finished, he folded the paper with precision and placed it back inside the envelope. "Leave us," he said. I did, but not before seeing the lady standing at the end of the corridor, watching the door. She did not ask what the document contained. She did not need to. That night, the house did not sleep. Voices rose and fell behind closed doors. Words sharpened, then dulled again by exhaustion. No shouting, only restraint, the most dangerous form of anger. By morning, everything appeared unchanged. Breakfast was served. The child arrived, smiling faintly, unaware of the ground shifting beneath him. The master announced that the will would be amended. A formality, he said, a matter of structure. The lady said nothing. Her silence had evolved. It was no longer avoidance, it was calculation. I was summoned later that day, not by the master, by the lady. She sat opposite me, hands folded, posture flawless. "You have seen many documents pass through this house." "Yes." "And you understand discretion?" "Yes." She leaned forward slightly. "If something were misunderstood," she continued, "it could destroy more than one life." I met her gaze. Truth rarely chooses its consequences. She did not smile. Instead, she said something that confirmed everything I feared. He must never know. She did not specify who. She did not need to. The child, the heir, the boy who carried a name that did not belong to him. I realized then that the document did not create the problem. It exposed it. The will did not accuse. It questioned. Dates, names, a gap where certainty should have been. Enough to invite doubt, enough to unravel a carefully constructed narrative. That afternoon, I found the child in the garden, seated beside the old oak tree. He was holding the signet ring. I had not noticed it go missing. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. "Yes." "Why doesn't it fit me?" The question struck deeper than he understood. "It will," I replied gently. "In time." He looked unconvinced. "My mother says things change. My father says they don't." I said nothing, because at that moment I understood my role had changed. I was no longer a witness, I was a variable. Later that evening, the master called for me again. He did not sit, he paced. "This document," he said, "will remain confidential." "Yes, sir." "If questions arise," he continued, "they will be addressed by me alone." "Yes, sir." He stopped and looked directly at me. "You are loyal." It was not a question, it was a reminder. Loyalty, however, is not obedience, it is memory, and memory does not bend easily. Later that night, I returned to the study alone. I opened the envelope, read every line. There it was, not an accusation, but an omission, a name absent where one should have been, a timeline that refused to align.
a silence loud enough to confirm the truth without ever stating it. The heir was not who the world believed him to be, and the world was about to find out. I replaced the document exactly as I had found it, but nothing was the same. Because once a secret is written down, it ceases to belong to those who created it. It begins waiting for someone willing to end it. And that someone was already inside the house.
The house did not collapse. That is what surprised me most. There was no scandal, no raised voices echoing through the corridors, no dramatic confrontation beneath chandeliers. Instead, there was something far worse. Acceptance. The master fell ill shortly after. Nothing sudden, nothing that demanded urgency. A slow decline, the kind that strips authority before it removes life. Doctors came and went. Advice was offered, ignored, repeated. Through it all, the will remained unchanged, unpublished, unacknowledged. Waiting. The lady assumed control of the household with remarkable ease. Too much ease. She moved through rooms as though she had rehearsed this moment long ago. Decisions were made quietly, staff replaced, schedules altered. The child was kept close, always within sight, never alone. Protected. Or contained. The master died 3 days later. Peacefully, they said. As though peace were something that could be measured. The funeral was immaculate. Old names attended, new alliances observed quietly from a distance. The child stood beside his mother, dressed in black, eyes dry. Too dry. When the time came to read the will, the document was produced exactly as expected. No amendments, no revelations. The heir was confirmed. Applause followed, restrained, respectful. A future secured. No one noticed my hands. How still they were. After the guests left, the house emptied in stages. Rooms lost their purpose, voices faded. Only the study remained untouched. She entered it that night without asking. "I want it destroyed," she said. "The document." "Yes," I replied. I placed it on the desk between us. She hesitated. For the first time, she hesitated. "You won't be blamed," she said. "History will remain clean." I looked at the paper, at the silence it contained. "History," I said, "is never clean, only incomplete." "Do it," she said. "Burn it." I did not. Instead, I folded it carefully and returned it to the envelope. "Why?" she asked. "Because the truth does not need to be revealed," I replied. "It only needs to exist." She understood then. I was not her ally, nor her enemy. I was something far worse. A reminder.